Baltimore became home to me. I was here for 5.5 years at WBAL, and when I got the call to come back, I didn't hesitate. Like this, I'll tell you, I had an opportunity in Seattle and an opportunity in Pittsburgh,
Hmm.
but I knew Baltimore, and I love Baltimore, and I wanted to come back to Baltimore. And WJZ has been so good to me, and they were good to me from that day that there was no doubt.
This show is brought to you by foryourwear.com. Foryourwear.com is the home of many podcasters' merchandise, including myself. You can go right on there and get shirts such as you can go get a shirt from those wrestling girls. Right now, they have the Summer Slay shirts if you're a wrestling fan and your lady likes wrestling and she wants to wear a SummerSlam style shirt, a Summer Slay, you can get those. They also have a Juneteenth collection because, we celebrate Juneteenth in June, but why not wear the shirt all year round? And they have a couple other shirts like the Black Lives Matter, Butt Guard, and more. Plus, you can get your Breaking Through Glass Ceilings merch from there as well as from other podcasters. So, go to foryourwear.com and let them know Brian H. Waters sent you. So one of the things about this business is that you'll learn some of the people you grew up watching, you'll actually become friends with. Today's guest is with the sports director of the CBS station in Baltimore, WJZ, Channel 13, the one and only Mark Viviano. Mark and I met at an Orioles game when I was working at Fox Sports 1340, and he saw me and Hugh Scott on the field during our pregame show. And after he finished, I spoke to him, I introduced myself. Shout out to a good friend, Nick Bedford, who was one of the producers. I let him know that Nick and I went to college together, and he told me that he was actually the producer that day. And when we talked about just what I was doing, he told me, hey, well, I'll give you a shout out on Twitter. And not only did he give me a shout out, but every time I saw him, he always met us with great conversation and advice. And we still talk on Twitter to this day, and it's a friendship that I'm grateful for. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get right to it. Here is my conversation with Mark Viviano. All right, ladies and gentlemen, on today's episode of Breaking Through the Glass Ceilings, I am super excited because I am bringing on someone and I've watched for years in my local town, Baltimore, and had a chance to meet him. And they say sometimes you shouldn't meet your heroes. Well, this doesn't apply for the one and only Mr. Mark Viviano. Mark, how you doing today?
Brian, that's too kind of an introduction. I consider us as contemporaries. I know I'm older, and I appreciate that. I do have people. It's so funny. Recently, I'm walking down the street in Baltimore, and a lady comes up to me. She goes, "Oh, I grew up watching you on TV." I said, I said, I really appreciate that, but it makes me feel old. Makes me feel old. She goes, "Well, I'm 50, so we grew up together." So I'm
well,
cool with that.
well, I definitely don't want to make you feel old. You're still in your prime. I've sit there
uh,
watching you. You're still in your prime.
Dude, age is not, listen, don't ever let age be something that overwhelms you or makes you think too much about, you know, every day is a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And as they add up, that just means we've been blessed that much longer. Don't,
Yeah.
I'm not going to let age be something that limits me or concerns me. I truly look at every day on this earth as a blessing, and whatever unfolds, unfolds. And however old I am, I am. And it, for now, it sure beats the alternative, which would be not being alive, Brian. So this is good.
How about that? So, let's talk about your career. You when did you decide that you wanted to get into sports and in journalism?
Great question. And it was like an epiphany. I grew up in St. Louis, and I went to a high school in St. Louis, Chaminade College Prep, and I'll mention that because that's where Jason Tatum went. That's where Bradley Beal went. and that's where David Lee went. Three guys from the NBA
Mhm.
from my high school, uh, and I played basketball there as well. But I wasn't good enough for the NBA, was I? uh, I love basketball. I love baseball. And you come to a point like any kid, and you may have had the same dream or wish or aspiration that you'd be a pro athlete, you
Mm.
know?
Yep.
And I certainly dreamed that, and sports were very much a part of my upbringing. I'm one of five kids. I have two brothers, and my father was played amateur baseball in St. Louis, so it was always a part of our lives. And so we played, and yeah, it's like, yeah, I wish I could be the center fielder for the St. Louis Cardinals. And once I realized that I wasn't going to be a center fielder for the Cardinals, or certainly wasn't big enough or good enough for the NBA, I had to think about, okay, practically, what do I want to do as I get to high school and I start thinking about college?
Mhm.
And a lot of my classmates were saying, I'm going to go to business school, I'm going to get an MBA and all that. I'm like, that's cool. That's cool. I don't want to do that. What do I want to do? Well, I like sports so much, and I know I'm not good enough to be a professional, but I fell in love with listening to sports on the radio and watching it on television. And I thought, well, that's a job. I mean, somebody does it. You got to
Yeah.
do it. And my mother, of her five kids, my mother thought that I was going to be like the one who would be like a doctor or a dentist. And because I did well in school, and she said, I want you to be a dentist. And I'm like, okay, mom, that's a fair thing to want from me. But when I decided for myself, it was my junior year in high school, Brian. I
Mhm.
remember the day. I said, you know what? I got to start thinking about college. And if I break it down to what I really want, I want to be a sportscaster. So I'll never forget walking into the kitchen and telling my mom, who was preparing lunch. I could see her to this day. I said, Mom, I want to be a sportscaster. And she stopped making lunch. And I thought, oh no, she's going to scold me for not wanting to be a dentist. And
Mhm.
she said to me, Brian, she said, you're going to be so good at that. I'll never forget that.
Mhm.
And I tell parents to this day what the power of affirmation is for your children.
Mhm.
Now, there are lines that we draw. If my son, one of my sons comes up to me and says, Dad, I want to be a movie star, I'll be like, well, I'm not going to tell him he can't be, but I'd probably say that's a great aspiration. Let's work on all the other things that it's going to take to get there, and make sure your life's covered or whatever.
Mhm.
But I go back to there's hardly a day that I come into work, and I've been doing this now for more than 30 years, that I don't think of my mom and her saying, "You're going to be good at this."
Right.
And she immediately enrolled me in a journalism camp at the University of Missouri, where I ended up going to journalism school and studying and getting some practical experience at the student television station, student radio station. And I just hit the ground running, man. I just loved it, and it was exactly what I wanted to do. And I've been doing it, like I said, for it's going on 36 years. And I'll always go back to that affirmation from my mom when I
Mhm.
was hesitant to tell her what I wanted to do, but she told me, "You're going to be good at it." And she
Wow.
she she never got to see me on the air. She passed away the next year, my senior year in high school.
Oh man, sorry
Uh,
to hear that.
but but I always carry that with me, that she wanted me to do this and thought I'd be good at it. And like I said, I've never wanted to disappoint her in that regard. So, uh, long story to your short question of when did I decide? That's when I decided, and that's how it unfolded.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love it. Uh, you know, you talked about your siblings, and what was their reaction when you told them?
It's funny, they weren't at all surprised because when I was 7 years old, my parents bought me a cassette tape recorder.
Hmm.
And we still have the cassette tape, if you can find a cassette player anymore, of me interviewing my brothers and sisters and my mom and dad about Christmas and the things that they got, their gifts and things like that. And one of the games that we got was a basketball game. and I'm 7 years old doing the play-by-play of this basketball game. So I think they knew that it was in me.
Mhm.
And even in high school, when I played basketball at Chaminade, whenever I would come out of a game, the guys wanted to sit next to me on the bench because when I was out of the game, I used to do play-by-play of the game. And so it was always like I always, for some reason, I just always had like this natural inclination to want to look at sports that way and
Mhm.
describe sports. When I was a little kid, um, my dad took my brothers and I to a Cardinals game. And when the game was over, I was probably 8 years old. When the game was over, I came home and I drew a picture of the game and this home run and the Montreal Expos were the other team and they were all sad because they lost to the Cardinals. And I gave it to my mom because she wasn't at the game. I said, "Mom, here's what happened." So like I was being a reporter when I was 8 years old. Like, Brian, I don't know where that came from.
Mhm.
I don't know what that was, but it was all natural and was a natural inclination of mine. And fast forward all these years later, I've been doing it. So my brothers and sisters probably they were like, "Yeah, you probably should do that." So and they've all been supportive and they've enjoyed the ride with me, and I appreciate them and all their support as well.
Now I love that story because I remember I had a cassette tape recorder, and this was around it was Madden 2005. Me and
Uh
my
huh.
friend Alan was playing, and we're sitting there, and I don't have the tape anymore either. It was so bad, but we were sitting there calling the games,
Yeah.
and I've always had a affirmation for iconic calls. I can
Hmm.
still remember um the announcers when Mark McGuire hit number 62.
Yep.
And, it's just like certain things, do you like growing up, especially in St. Louis, do you have any like calls that always stood out to you?
Yeah, it's funny. Again, this is part of my upbringing that as you ask me these questions, I'm starting to remember more things. But my father had an, a, an album, a record album, vinyl
Mhm.
of highlights of the 1964 St. Louis Cardinals World Series season. It was Harry Carey and Jack Buck were the Hall of Fame announcers, but this was and and my brother and I, my younger brother and I used to listen to that record all the time. This is 1964 baseball highlights on a record.
Mhm.
And to your point, you remember those things. Like you remember those. And there were a bunch of them. But one that I can say, I was in college when the Cardinals played the Dodgers in the playoffs, and Ozzie Smith hit the home run off Tom Niedenfuer, and Ozzie was batting left-handed, and there was the little chyron on the screen said Ozzie Smith has never hit a left-handed home run, and he
Mm.
hits it in a game, and Jack Bach, his call was "Go crazy, fans, go crazy," and you'll never forget that. It was just
Yeah.
so cool. So yeah, things like that certainly stick with you. And I'll tell you this too. I grew up in St. Louis, right?
Mhm.
In the 1970s, the Cardinals were not very good. And in the 1970s, all the playoff games were day games. They were not playing night games, even in the early 1970s. I would run home from grade school to watch the games on TV with my dad. And guess
Mhm.
who was playing in those games more times than not? The Baltimore Orioles.
Wow.
So as a kid growing up in St. Louis, I'm watching Brooks Robinson, Jim Palmer, Boog Powell. I mean, I'm watching the greats, Paul Blair. Like, I thought those guys were like magical. I'm in St. Louis watching because the Orioles were always the best team.
Mhm.
And I'm watching this going, these guys are great. Like the Cardinals, yeah, they were my favorite team, but they weren't that good. But these guys, they were always in the playoffs and they were so good. Fast forward, I've been in Baltimore now for 25 years, and Jim Palmer's a friend of mine. Boog's a friend of mine. Brooks is a friend of mine. And that's just surreal, man. That's just, you can't write that script. I
Yeah.
mean, to go from that city to this city, and oh, by the way, the Orioles were the St. Louis Browns who
Mhm.
moved here in 1954, right? So
Yep.
it's almost like, you know, hey, God writes these scripts, man. We just play our role. So it's funny to just kind of think about those odd connections. And but I say all that just eternally blessed, Brian. Just
Mhm.
like it's so cool. I'm not bragging about any of it. I'm just amazed that I get to be on this ride. That's all.
No, no, this is great. Like looking at your LinkedIn, that's my cheat sheet. What was it like starting off in Cedar Rapids in the Iowa area? Like we going
Yeah,
from St. Louis and then you going, they always
to
like
Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Well, I'm from the Midwest, and this is very, when I was at the University of Missouri,
mhm,
uh, my sophomore year in college, I luckily ran into, I mean, hey, much of what we do, Brian, and I know you have stories similar to mine, you just get opportunities here and there and you just seize on them.
mhm,
There was a guy that lived in the dorm who was driving up to Hannibal, Missouri on weekends to call high school football and basketball games on this little country radio station. And he was like, "Would you want to do that with me?" I'm like, "Would I want to? Let's do it." So I would go up to rural Missouri towns and do these high school games on this radio station and just had a blast. So when I graduated University of Missouri, the study that we did at Mizzou was your work, you trained to be a news reporter. Like
mhm,
I was doing hard news, but I auditioned for and got to be the weekend sports guy at the college owned and run station. So when I graduated, I had sent out 20 news tapes to be a news reporter somewhere and probably about 8 to 10 sports tapes. And one of them was to the station in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I'm not a very like forward person. I'm not really that confident. And I was like, at this point, I'll never forget the day I woke up after graduation. I was staring at the ceiling and I said, I'm unemployed. Like
mhm,
I didn't have a job. It was like you studied all this time and it's like, okay, now I need to get a job.
mhm.
So I called up to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and I said, "Hey, did you get my tape?" They're like, "Yeah, we got about 100 of them, but we got your tape." And I said, I totally lied. I said, "I've got some relatives up in that area. I'm going to be driving through. You mind if I stop by?" They're like, "Yeah, you can stop by, whatever." So I drove up to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It was about a 4-hour drive, maybe from
Mhm.
the University of Missouri. And I just walked in there like I knew what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. And they were like, "Well, if you since you're here, do you want to do an audition?" I didn't even have a suit. I borrowed a suit jacket from one of the reporters there. I, I just walked off the street. So I do this audition. I go back and I type up scripts and everything, and I do this audition. And I thought it went pretty good, whatever. And they're like, "Hey, thanks for dropping by, all this and that." And it was about a week or so later, I got a call, and they're like, "We want to hire you." I'm
Mhm.
like, "Awesome, yeah, let's do it." And they're like, "So you want the job?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want the job." And they said, "Do you want to know how much? Do you want to negotiate a salary?" I'm like, "Whatever, just how much you want to pay me?" like, I didn't care. Like I just wanted that job so bad. So, and it was like basically going from college to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It was like the next step. It was like playing minor league A ball, I guess you would say. And I got a stipend. I call it a stipend. It's like I'm not getting paid much, but I got a stipend. But as I worked there, and I ended up working there for 3 years. But while I was working there, one of the directors I got to know real well. He goes, "Can I tell you something? You remember that day you drove up here and just walked in and did that audition?" I said, "Do I remember it? I'll never forget it." He goes, "They wanted to hire you on the spot."
Wow.
And I said, "Are you kidding me?" Because I left there saying, "I'll never see this town again."
Uh-huh.
Like they're just laughing at this kid who just drove up and said he was in the area. But so you never know. But you do your
Mhm.
best. you just do your best job in everything you do, because that may be the only impression you get to make. So just do your best, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is. When you meet someone, Brian, and you meet them for the first time, you know what we say about the power of a first impression?
Yep.
It matters. It matters a lot. So that taught me a lot, that experience. And then from there, I went on to Dayton, Ohio, and covered for the first time regularly the NFL. Dayton's near Cincinnati, and I would
Mm-hmm.
drive up to Cleveland all the time and cover the
Okay.
Browns, because in that part of Ohio, both teams were still very popular. And then the boss who was there, too, the general manager and the news director from Dayton moved to Baltimore, and they hired me in Baltimore too. So uh, sometimes that's, if you make a good impression with the bosses that you work for, that can be advantageous as well. So that's kind of the line that I was on, and like I said, and I'll always say it, just blessed every step of the way.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Breaking Through Glass Ceilings with Brian H. Waters. I want to let you know, now you can have your own Breaking Through Glass Ceilings t-shirts. Simply go to foryourwear.com, FORURWEAR.com. Go to the podcasters tab, click Brian H. Waters, and you can purchase your own t-shirt. Appreciate anybody who wants to support the show. Want to show that, look, you rock with the message. You've been breaking through glass seals. So go ahead and get a t-shirt. I appreciate you. And also check out some of the other podcasters that have signed up with foryourwear.com and the homepage as well.
Yeah, I want to talk about, Baltimore especially. You came here, WBAL.
Yep.
And one of the things that, I can remember too, you breaking the story that we was getting the Ravens.
Yep.
What was that like? Especially you having that connection to the
Yeah.
Browns, and now you have this connection with Baltimore that as a child because you saw the Orioles play so much. What was like? What did all that mean, and what was it like?
Oh,
Especially you was the person who brought back your report brought back so much excitement to the city. Like I tell people I can remember going into Ames seeing a Baltimore Browns shirt.
yeah. That's
And a
right.
lot of people don't remember that. But I can remember seeing a Baltimore Browns t-shirt.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
what
I
was that
remember
like?
that. Uh, on a lot of levels, Brian, on a journalistic level, it was thrilling, but also terrifying,
Mhm,
because the stakes were high. And I sort of benefited to a degree that I was new here,
mhm,
because a lot of the reporters who had been here for some time had been down the road of Baltimore's going to get a football team. And they'd been burned by that. The whole, when the NFL chose Jacksonville and Carolina, when Baltimore was hoping they'd get the expansion team, that turned a lot of people off. Um, there had been rumors about the Bengals moving here. There had been rumors about the
mhm,
Arizona Cardinals moving to Baltimore. So I just kind of come in pretty new. I didn't experience. I was aware of it, the history of certainly the Colts, and then the back and forth of other teams maybe looking here, but I wasn't jaded by it.
mhm.
And when I got the information that I got, which was solid information, obviously, um, not just me, but Jerry Sandusky and our news director at the time, Dave Roberts, who's now at ESPN. He's in management at ESPN. We just dived in and did the reporting to figure it out, verify. And what's interesting about that time, and I say terrifying because the, we were being quoted nationwide, like we were the only ones with the story.
Mhm.
And what's interesting about that is that can't happen today with Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, because everybody grabs it.
Mhm.
Everybody grabs it, repeats it, and you don't own it anymore. Like
Yeah.
it's just out there. But in this case, no one else had it. And there was no social media to spread it. It was all WBAL TV in Baltimore is reporting. And that was everywhere. Uh, And when I say terrifying, it was like if we were wrong, I mean, this was going to look bad.
Yeah.
I was on a Cleveland radio station as we were reporting this, and they tried to ambush me a little bit, and they said, "Well, we got the guy on the phone, who's the reporter who's breaking this story in Baltimore about." And they said, "By the way, we have the mayor of Baltimore, Michael White, here in studio with us." And Mayor White was like, he was ripping into me like, you've been fooled. Art Modell's done this before. He's fooled you too. And I was like, all due respect, Mr. Mayor, I'm just sharing with you the information that I have, that I've verified. Um, it's up to you to do what you need to do. And it turns out that city kind of turned on that mayor for not having done what he needed to do to keep the Cleveland Browns and build them that new stadium. Uh,
Mm.
but anyway, that's where, while it was thrilling, it had those moments like some sleepless nights. Um, but in the end, I'll never forget the day that the governor of Maryland. Well, I can share with you this. It was Mayor Kurt Schmoke
Mhm.
who was kind of our final. Um, he was our final source who said, "Yep, you got it. It's going to happen, and there's going to be a press conference on November the 6th." And when we nailed that one down, Brian, and we broke it, we said, "It's done. It's happening." And this is 1995.
Right.
So think think about this. This is funny. There are going to be people watching your podcast right now who will say, "What is he talking about?" I typed out on a typewriter a press release on WBAL TV letterhead. WBAL TV is reporting the Cleveland Browns will be moving to Baltimore. Art Modell, who's been in Cleveland for this many years, has struck a deal with the Maryland Stadium Authority for the construction of a new stadium. This and I faxed it to ESPN.
Wow.
And Bob Lee,
Mhm.
then an anchor on ESPN, read the fax on the air. He said, WBAL TV in Baltimore is reporting it. Like, that's how, think about that. That sounds like the Stone Age. Like, why didn't we hand it to the Pony Express to write it up to Connecticut or something like that? But then for Jerry Sandusky and I to be standing at that press conference when Governor Glenn Denning was up there with Art Modell, and we were there, and we had the story, and it was right there in front of us now. And that press conference on that November day in 1995 was the culmination of all that work. So
And
that
like I mentioned earlier, it's coming back to me. I remember watching like Martin that night because I think it was like a Thursday night or something, and I remember coming across the ticker, and like that was the confirmation. And then I feel like my mother and godmother, because we may have been out of school that Friday, and we went to Chuck E. Cheese and up there in the East Point, and next
uh,
door was the Ames that we went into, and I saw
yeah,
the shirts.
the Baltimore. Boy, Brian, if you had the $5 or whatever to buy that shirt, that'd have been a keepsake, wouldn't it?
I
Though.
know, because a lot of people don't realize that, like, we don't, like you said, Twitter is so national, and
Yeah.
you hear people talking about the Browns for, they're the Ravens, one of their rivals. And I was like, yeah, at one point before, they decided, okay, Cleveland could keep the name, which I'm glad they did. I
Right.
said, we was the Baltimore Browns. And people was like, what? I said, yeah, well, we wasn't officially, but we had merch just because people were
Yeah.
so excited about getting the team.
Yeah. People just started printing up stuff right
Yeah.
now. Like, let's do it. Let's get it done. Which I thought too. Kind of full circle once again, Brian.
hmm
The Orioles were the St. Louis Browns.
hmm
Could you imagine another Browns move? So that is two Browns teams that have moved here. Both have
Yeah.
changed their name here, and both were in cities. One in which I lived, and the other in which I covered. So if there are any more teams coming here, they'd have to move here either from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Dayton,
Uh,
Ohio, or I worked in Atlanta too at CNN. So,
yeah.
but
Maybe we,
Baltimore's good with teams. We're good.
I was like, maybe we get the Atlanta Hawks.
Atlanta Hawks. By the way, Brian,
Huh?
where the Atlanta Hawks moved to Atlanta from? St.
Where?
Louis.
Well,
St.
yep,
Louis.
that's right. With Pistol Pete.
They were the St. Louis Hawks.
So wait, you're the one who moved teams.
I talk well, not just that. Think about this, Brian. This is funny. I grew up in St. Louis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So St. Louis had the baseball team moved to Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
They have they had the St. Louis Cardinals football team move to Arizona.
Yeah.
They have had the Rams move in and move out to Los Angeles. They've
Uh,
lost two NFL teams. They've lost the Hawks, who moved from the basketball team that moved from St. Louis to Atlanta. So I'm telling you, man, St. Louis is just a place for teams like to stop in and hang out. Although there's one team they're never getting out of there, and that's the Cardinals.
right.
They've been there for more. They've been there for 125 years, and I don't think they're going anywhere.
Look, Pujols came back. So,
Even Paul, even Albert had to come back because
which, in my opinion, he shouldn't have never left. But that,
Oh, trust me, your opinion jives well with everybody in St. Louis. You thought
okay.
he should have been an all-time Cardinal for his whole
Mm,
career, but he's back and all's forgiven, so it's cool.
yeah. Now you went to Atlanta, for CNN for a few years.
Yeah,
How did that opportunity come about? And
yeah. That was, I think like most of us, I can't speak for you, Brian, but ESPN certainly was, and in some ways, for some, still is sort of that pinnacle job in sports.
Mhm.
I mean, they're the worldwide leader, and we all know, all the talent that's gone through there. And
I was there 2 years as a production assistant.
there you
So,
go, right? So
hmm
you've been in on those hallowed grounds. I'm surprised
yeah.
they didn't keep you and put you on the air, to be honest with you. But
Oh well, thank you.
well,
I appreciate
so
that.
that was certainly a thought and a hope, and I had sent them tapes over the years. But then CNN Sports Illustrated started in 1996.
Hmm
CNN Sports Illustrated a it was CNN, and this was their sports entity that paired with the writers of Sports Illustrated, of which Stephen A. Smith was one, Tom Verducci was another one, John Wertheim. I mean, they had these some great writers. I mean, so we had a great crew. Um, and anyway, when they first started, had sent them a tape, and then they had kept it, and they checked back with me in 1999, and I was ready. And
hmm
it wasn't ESPN, but to me, I got to work with uh, Fred Hickman was my desk mate, um, and that was just I worked with some of the best people, and I loved that job, and I loved it. Now it was short lived
Okay.
because at the time CNN was bought by Time Warner. Well, they merged with Time Warner, then AOL bought them. So in 2.5 years, they shut down shop. But I anchored the last show ever on CNN Sports Illustrated with Mike Galanos, who ended up going to headline news at CNN. And again, talk about being blessed. It was at the time that we knew that CNN was closing us down
hmm
that Baltimore had called, WJZ had called and asked if I'd be interested in coming back. I'm like, don't ask me twice, you know. So was able to come back and been at WJZ for 20 years, man. Time
Yeah,
flies. It does.
congratulations on 20
20
years.
years.
What's it like? Obviously you have a love for the city. When did you fall in love with it to the point you want to come back? Because you can make a stop here
Yeah,
for a
good
little
point.
bit, but what made you say like you wanted to go back to Baltimore?
You know, I didn't want to leave the city,
Okay.
but I did want that job. That job at CNN was one of the best experiences of my life.
Mhm.
And I really enjoyed Atlanta. It was all good. And as that was my first experience with corporate media, like something as big as Time Warner and AOL.
Mhm.
And what I'll remember about that was if you've ever been to the CNN Center in Atlanta, it's
Yep.
huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's beautiful. It's a great place to work. I mean, it is awesome. And every day I walked, I'll never forget, I would park in the employees parking lot and there was a bridge over into the CNN Center. And as I'm walking over that bridge and I come to the CNN Center, there's the big CNN logo on the sidewalk. And there's a huge mat with CNN. And every day I looked at that and I said, this is where I work. And
Mhm.
I was just, it just really made me, it just gave me inspiration and pride. Like, go do a good job. This is where you are now.
Yeah.
So though, even though it was only 2.5 years, there wasn't a day that I didn't appreciate being there. Now, that said, I also remember going to the elevator to go up to the third floor where our sports offices were. And every day after AOL had purchased Time Warner, they posted their stock price there. It was like, okay, this is big corporate media. It was noticeable that the stock price kept going down. And then they stopped posting it.
Mhm.
And then we realized that when AOL bought, they were going to trim anything that wasn't a big money maker. When Ted Turner owned CNN wholly, he didn't care. He was a billionaire. He didn't
That's
care.
sound like him
Yeah,
and WCW.
yeah. I mean, think about this. He didn't care. He wanted a sports channel under
Mhm.
his umbrella of channels. He didn't care if it wasn't making money. He wanted to have it to complete his networks. He had the money. He wasn't worried about that. AOL buys in, they're like, if it's not profitable, we're getting rid of it. So we all eventually found out we were done. We didn't know when, but we knew we were done. And I was working with some real talented guys, and it was distressing for a number of guys. I was single, so I didn't have a family to worry about at the time. But a lot of guys were really in a tough spot. And one of the things we said to each other was, "We're the resume network, guys.
Mhm.
Everybody out there, from ESPN on down to all the locals, they know that we're going to be looking for jobs. And they know we're ripe because we're working at a good place right now. Let's do our best job always, but certainly now, because we're going to be all out on the street here looking, and we can show them what we can do now in real time." So I said, we're the resume network. Let's do it. you know?
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
A lot of times people get discouraged
Yeah, you could
when
get the
those
yeah. And I said, I have used this analogy. We did not know when the end date was. They didn't know. And my analogy was, it's like running down a dark alley as fast as you can, knowing you're going to run into a brick wall, but you don't know when.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, eventually it's going to hit me. But the timing, as I mentioned, again, fortunate was that um, Baltimore called and they said, can I came in, I interviewed for the job, they offered me the job, and I anchored the last show on CNN Sports Illustrated in May of 2002 and started day one in Baltimore at WJZ in June of 2002. Just
Wow.
enough time for me to get moved and everything like that. Again, the Lord has blessed me in many ways, Brian. So
Amen.
it's all good. It's all good.
Now, being back in Baltimore, what's been, some of the highlights? I mean, obviously you've seen, since 2002, you've seen the Ravens win the Super Bowl, seen the
Hmm.
Orioles come close. um, but also
Yeah,
you've seen your Cardinals from afar win. So like
yeah.
how has that been like, was there, times where you're like, man, it would be nice to be home for that,
You know
before we
what?
get into the Orioles and the Ravens. How about with the Cardinals?
It's funny you say that because there was a time when I was pining to get back home,
Hmm.
uh, to kind of go full circle, because I interned at a station in St. Louis, and that's where my family's all still in Missouri, and I thought that would be what I really wanted to do. But it wasn't. The opportunity never was ripe for that. Baltimore became home to me. I was here for 5.5 years at WBAL, and when I got the call to come back, I didn't hesitate. Like this, I'll tell you, I had an opportunity in Seattle and an opportunity in Pittsburgh.
Hmm.
but I knew Baltimore and I love Baltimore and I wanted to come back to Baltimore. And WJZ has been so good to me and they were good to me from that day that there was no doubt. So coming back, probably Brian, bigger than any stories that I covered, like you mentioned, Super Bowl, um, and just the whole new wave of Buck Showalter and the Orioles, and
Mhm.
I got to work at Masson, traveling with the Orioles too, doing a radio show for 6 years,
Mhm.
105.7 The Fan, all that stuff. What Baltimore became to me and is for me now is home. And it was confirmed and affirmed by my family from St. Louis when they came here to visit me, both when I was at BAL and now at WJZ. Every time they come here, they're like, this feels like St. Louis, like similar size city,
Mhm.
just everything about it is very similar city, layout, uh, demographics are similar, the feel, it's very similar. But Baltimore for me is always going to be home because this is where I met my wife and this is where I'm raising my children. And my family has always been like, we're so glad that you're there. They miss me and they come and visit. And I'm going to be taking a vacation to back to St. Louis. So my boys get to, see grandma and all that stuff. That's still vital.
Mhm.
Um, but that's what Baltimore is to me. It's home. And it's 20 years at WJZ, and I was 5.5 years at WBAL. That's nearly half my life here.
Yeah.
In fact, I left St. Louis. What was I? 21, 22. So I've lived in Baltimore longer than I lived in St. Louis. So, like me or not, Baltimore, you're stuck. So,
What did it
uh,
feel weird going from WBAL to WJZ?
nah, it
Okay.
didn't. I was doing weekends at BAL. Jerry obviously is a legend at BAL. He's 30 plus years there alone. He was there here in the early 90s. Um, but to be named sports director here, and
Mhm.
Jerry and I have always remained friends, and here we are at competing stations. Uh, but it's a fun competition. I mean, we're both blessed,
Yeah.
to do what we're doing. And I'll always consider the folks at BAL like family, the ones that are still there that I worked with. And but WJZ is definitely 20 years. I mean, come
Yeah.
on. I mean, truly blessed. And I met my wife here at WJZ.
Yeah.
Uh, Funny story. I mean, I mentioned I was doing daily radio in addition to TV. So I was working way too much, but I loved it. I'd
Yeah.
wake up in the morning, I'd leave my house at 8 a.m., I'd get home at midnight, and I was working constantly in between. But it was work that I loved.
Mhm.
But at one point, Brian, I knew it was too much. I knew that I was living a full professional life, but it wasn't a balanced life. It was a life that just didn't include enough other people. It was all centered on the things that I wanted. And I've shared this story publicly, so I don't mind sharing this with you. I'm driving up to JFX one of those many mornings going up to the radio station, and I felt pressure on my chest.
Mm.
And I'm someone who's very active runner. I've run 35 marathons. It's very much a part of me to exercise a lot. And I thought, I think I'm healthy, but what is that? Is that my heart? What is that? My my feeling, and I say this with all sincerity, I think that was God telling me to slow down. You're doing too much and you're not living a full life. You're working, that's great, but you're working too much and you're not doing what you should be doing, which is living a full life. And it was shortly after that, I went and told the program director at the radio station, I can't do this anymore. And he said, I've been wondering when this day was going to come because I don't know how you were doing it to begin with. So I'm working at WJZ just shortly after that. And I get a top line from one of our producers who's a runner. And
Mhm.
she said, hey, I have a question about running. Can I'm training for the Boston Marathon, this and that. I said, well, come back and talk to me. And she walked in and I looked at her and I'm like, what's your name? She'd been working here for 2 years. I didn't even know her name.
Oh wow.
That's how crazy focused I was doing this other stuff. Well, long story short, we started. I said, "Well, I got free time now. I'm not doing this radio station. Let's train together." Because I was training for a marathon. That's my wife now, Brian.
That's amazing.
That's my wife, and we have 2 children.
Hmm.
And when I tell you, I was told to slow down and live a full life. Thank God my heart was open to that call because that's how I met my wife. Because otherwise, if she sent me that top line, I would have been like, "Yeah, here's a training program. Have at it." Instead, I was like, "No, let's run together." you know. So that's again, the Lord works in mysterious ways. So
Yeah.
so
Wow.
it is.
That that is. I'm speechless. That's amazing right there. And like I
I
said,
mean,
me.
Brian, there could be people, and I don't care. There may
Mhm.
be people who say, that sounds like that's ridiculous or that's hocus pocus. That's fine. It's my
Mhm.
testimony.
Exactly.
I say it with complete confidence and faith that I know. I
Hmm.
lived it. I lived it. So I love to share it
Yeah.
because what it does to me to share that is to let everyone to know to keep your heart open, keep your mind open, and it's not about you. It's about this journey that we've been given this opportunity to have, but it's
Hmm.
not ours. It's directed elsewhere.
Hmm.
Look outside of yourself. Look outside. Live a full life. Consider everything. Uh, that's how I. That's why I like to share that story because you never know what door it could open for somebody.
Yeah.
Um, but your heart's got to stay open, brother. That's for sure.
No, I definitely appreciate that, and I'm know that the audience, everybody listening and watching, will definitely take something from that right there because that's powerful. Before we get out of here, I always ask people, the title of the show is called Breaking Through the Glass Ceiling. So when did Mark Viviano break through the glass ceiling when you realize like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do and I'm pretty good at this. I got it.
Boy, that's a great question, Brian.
Thank you.
Let me tell you this. I don't believe even in 36 years
Hmm.
that I got to be careful answering this because deep down, I don't think I've ever said that.
Hmm.
I think I still operate every day like I got to prove I'm good enough to do this. Now, does my experience allow me confidence in doing it? Yes. Does what I've done indicate to me that I should be able to do it and can be driven to do it better? Yes. But I never want to feel like I've done it to where I don't have to bring my full effort and attention to it when I'm on the job. Um, I think I owe that to the blessing that this job is, that I never want to feel like, oh, I got this. It's good. No, I do have the confidence now over these many years that I know what it takes,
Hmm.
but I always want to bring to the job all that I have to make it the best it can be for that day. I really do. Um, and
Do you
that's
have
the
a moment
challenge.
when that first came?
No,
Okay.
I can't say that, Brian. I can't say that there was a moment. I think that's just an ethic. I think
Hmm.
that's just, and I'll share with you another background story. My father, he had his own small wholesale produce company. And my brothers and I used to work on a produce truck with my dad in the summertime and during Christmas break. And I saw my father wake up at midnight every night to get in his truck and drive it down to the market in St. Louis and fill it up with produce and deliver it. And then when we got old enough, we would drive a truck too. And it's watching someone work that hard every day to support his family. And there was no days off during the week. There were none. Like that, it's your business. Nobody else is going to drive the truck for you. You got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that, and I witnessed it as a young man every day. And I thought, and there was times like I was on the truck with my dad when I was 10 years old, and we'd be bouncing down the road, and he'd say, "I'm doing this so you can go to college and you don't have to do this." And I'm 10. I'm like, "College? I don't know what you're talking about. Whatever." But now when I leave WJZ at night and I'm driving home and I see a produce truck driving,
Mm-hmm.
because he's going to the market now. Somebody in Baltimore is going to the market to, start their long day. I think of my father. I share that because when you ask me about, having that moment or anything, it's just an ethic. It's like you better show up and work hard,
Yeah.
and you better do it every day, because every day counts. And it's that, someone may tune into the 11 o'clock news tonight that's never watched WJZ before, just moved to town or used to watch another station, and they
Mm-hmm.
might see you for the first time, and you better bring it. You better do something that makes them say, "I'm gonna watch this guy again."
Yeah.
But that's only if you're invested and you bring everything you got. So
Mm-hmm.
never, not a single moment,
Yeah.
but a constant, um, a constant drive and attention to doing whatever it takes to do the best, that you can with what you got, for sure.
Yeah. Wow, man. Mark, I really, appreciate this. I appreciate your time. I can remember that Orioles game, and me and my best friend Hugh was there and
Oh
covering the
yeah,
game. And
you guys
yeah,
were doing. Let me tell you, uh, that was so cool. Like I love like our friendship
yes.
because it means a lot. I could see in you and Hugh that hard work, that determination, that dream that it's gotten you doing what you're doing now. I mean, you were just like, we're very similar in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of saw something out there and you said, "I can do that," and you applied yourself to that. And I remember meeting you guys saying, "These guys are going to do this. These
Yeah.
guys are going to make it work for them." And you
Mhm.
shared with me some of the stuff that you were doing on the website, and I'm like, that inspires me, and I love to talk to young people that are following their dreams and in a business that I'm familiar with. So
Mhm.
trust me, it gives me great joy to see you doing well, and
Thank you.
Hugh. And that was so kind what you guys said on your one show together. It was humbling. It was very humbling, to be honest with you. So I know you will do what something that's important to me to do is you pay that forward.
Yes.
And when you run into a young, aspiring broadcaster or journalist, you check out their work. You point
Mhm.
out what any tips that you got, and you help them along. I know you'll do that. I know you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, I have a group of mentees, and we actually have, like, a Twitter group chat,
There you
and
go.
it's so inspiring to see a lot of this stuff. Like, one that sticks out was, like, my friend Ashley Baker. She's always in the, Twitter Spaces has been a big thing, and she's, like, found her niche there, and she's somebody I like to say, like, she can say things that'll rattle people. One time she had a Lamar Jackson take I didn't care for too much, and I called. I was like, "Come on now, stop talking about my quarterback, sis." But to like you said, paying it forward, it's always fun to see because especially when you love the business so much,
Yeah.
you want to see it better and you want to see it
Yeah.
constantly improve. So,
Yes.
like
That's
I
right.
I appreciate everything you've done and everything you continue to do. To be able to when I was in high school and college and watch you on TV, and now to become friends, like that's a blessing. That's straight from God.
Well, blessings mine, brother. I'm telling you, every one of these relationships we gain and all whatever number of days that we have are
Mhm.
all part of the treasure. That's for sure, and we appreciate that. And we, like we say, we pay it forward. So
Mhm.
uh, the honor and pleasure is mine, and I hope we do it again. I would want to be the one asking you questions next.
Okay, that's
I,
fine.
I, I'm sure your audience knows you a little bit, but I'd
Uh-huh.
like to dig deeper and get more. into your motivations and your story and your the things that got you to where you are. Because that's what I would love to know as well. That's just see, you're doing what I like to do. I like to ask the question. I like to
Yeah,
ask the question.
I
So
learned from you.
uh, I'll whenever if down the road you want to do a flip the script show and let me
Okay.
ask you, we'll do that.
Absolutely. I was telling my parents about this and how excited I was, and so was they. So I know they can't wait to see this.
I know your parents are proud of you, brother. That's
Thank
all
you. I
good.
appreciate it.